Revelation 1889. From the 16th of April 1941. Spiritual decline. Regression. The spiritual decline is so obvious that it only requires some attention to recognize the necessity of help from God. It is not only indifference or a spiritual flattening of humanity, which would be tantamount to a spiritual standstill, but it is more a resistance against any influence of spiritual forces which want to help people to maturity of soul. It is a blatant rejection of divine forces, a fleeing from the sphere of good spiritual currents, and thus an immensely significant step backwards in spiritual terms. And humanity is therefore in the greatest spiritual danger. God, however, does not leave them to their self-chosen fate, but uses all means to make people aware of their dangerous situation and to motivate them to make contact with the good spiritual forces so that they can receive help from this side. And that is the most important task of the beings of light at present, to gain access to the hearts of men. For only then can a higher spiritual level be reached among humanity, provided that the beings of light can assert themselves, and thus the teaching forces can have an uninterrupted effect on the earthly people entrusted to their care. It is only a question of time how the spiritual world will accomplish the spiritual higher development. That is, without the intervention of the eternal deity, eternities could pass before people's thinking would change. Since the human being believes that he has progressed very far in the knowledge of things which lie outside earthly life. However, no particularly well-developed intellectual activity is needed to recognize the eternal deity, only a kind, loving heart. The latter, however, can only be found in isolated cases, and consequently people are standing on a dead end. They keep trying to further develop their intellect, and this leads to the opposite of what should be achieved. The human being is inclined to throw everything overboard that only leans on spiritual activity. He rejoices in his intellectual thinking but cannot achieve the least with it if he does not open his heart at the same time, that is, pays less attention to his intellectual thinking and thinks and acts more according to his feeling. Only then will the strength grow in him. And now he will also recognize the invalidity of what was previously presented to him as truth. Only then can the spiritual low of humanity be remedied. Through God's intervention people's thinking will be changed, for the intellect will now also affirm what the heart has already recognized, and then it will be easy for the beings in the beyond to introduce people to the right knowledge, for they act with divine approval. They carry out the teaching activity, and it merely depends on the human being's will that his spiritual low will be remedied. Amen. Amen.